Lincoln Riley and the Trojans may finally be back. They had a much better season last year than at least we predicted. They lived up to the expectations of almost everybody else. I think the general consensus was they would win, eight, maybe nine games. Ended up going 9-3 in the regular season before dropping a bowl game to TCU. Our prediction was 7-5. It was kind of a thing of, they have to break out of their perennial barely make a bowl game streak that they had been going on. We kind of did the same thing with Texas A&M. We're not going to predict them to go above 8-4 until they actually do. Multiple teams proved us wrong using that theory this past season. USC was one of them, and good for them. They did a very good job last year, and they're looking to build on it with this offseason that they've had so far.
And the reason they're building on it is because they have so many starters returning. Eight offensive starters coming back, including starting quarterback Jaden Maiava. Both their starting running backs as well. Only one of them counts in this stat, though. But really, those three losses they have are Makai Lemon, Jacoby Lane, and their starting tight end in Lake McCree. Those are three big losses, though. You're losing two of the best wide receivers in college football last season, and you're losing a tight end that was very good as well and was very impactful in the game. So having to replace those guys is obviously going to be a tall task, but it's USC. They obviously get a lot of high-end talent coming in, and as you can probably see too, having the number one high school recruiting class. And then defensively, six starters coming back. The main loss that they have is in the secondary, losing two of their starting safeties in Kamari Ramsey and Bishop Fitzgerald, as well as one of their cornerbacks. But overall, it's not too bad on defense. That has been the problem with USC in the past, but they have been making some strides forward. And I think they did a good job of addressing that in the transfer portal. Now that transfer portal class is only at number 30 because they only have eight guys coming in through the transfer portal, but that doesn't hold them back from having the number five overall recruiting class, due largely in part to that number one overall high school recruiting class. As for those additions to replace that hole that Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane are leaving, they're bringing in Terrell Anderson, wide receiver from NC State. And he's a big body wide receiver listed at 6'2". I mean, that's going to be a great weapon for Mayava to utilize. Defensively, though, that's where I think they had to make the biggest impact, and they did a good job of addressing a lot of those concerns. Jontez Williams coming in at cornerback from Iowa State. Iowa State has turned out a lot of great corners in the past couple of years, including it in the NFL. And then Zariah Fisher coming in on the edge from Penn State. A lot of great edge rushers from Penn State as well. And I think he's going to do a great job after the loss of Anthony Lucas on that defensive line. And then to replace linebacker Eric Gentry, who was the focal point of that defense, that leader, they have Devin Bryant coming in from Washington. A little undersized, I think 5'11" for a linebacker is maybe a little bit small if he's going to be a coverage guy. Maybe he's a bit more of a pass rusher, but I don't know. Maybe that's just the fact that I'm used to having at least like 6'2", 6'3" linebackers on my college ultimate team. But overall, talent-wise, it's USC. They get some of the best players in the country, and with this amount of returning talent they have coming back, it's an A. I mean, you're returning so many high-level players. Needs-wise, it's only going to be a B plus for me. I'm a little surprised that the transfer portal is that small. I know they don't need that much, but when you're as big of a brand as USC, I'm a little shocked they couldn't get any like high-end wide receivers. Obviously, the big story during the offseason or during the bowl season really was the push they made to get Chris Henry Jr. to flip from Ohio State, and they ended up losing out on that. And I think that if they weren't able to get him, that grade would shoot up, and this would probably be an A plus off season for them. It's only going to be an A minus though, which like is not bad by any means. But with this core that they have returning and having that entire offensive line coming back, they're going to be in great shape to make a run in the Big Ten this season.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on that, they did get two four-star receivers. But like Connor said, the five-star would have been huge. But Caden Dixon Wyatt, they did get to flip from Ohio State. They also signed Ethan Feaster. Both guys are four stars. Now, looking at their schedule, first three games here. As you can see, it says to be announced on August 29th. That is our guess that's where USC is going to put this game because they on their website they have October 17th and November 7th listed as buys. So our guess is that in week 0 they're going to schedule some random FCS team. This is because they canceled the Notre Dame game. So they have to fill it with somebody. It's probably going to be a no name, and we're giving them a 100% chance to win this game because at this point, there's no chance that they're going to put somebody in who could actually beat them. And then you have Fresno State and Louisiana. Those will both also be 100% before starting Big Ten play. First game there is going to be a road trip to Rutgers. Now, Greg Schiano's done an okay job at Rutgers. I feel like just overall, the program has had some tough schedules these past few years. It's really just been hard to get them going. They're losing Athon Kalimanis, which I think I butchered his name, but either way, he's not returning at quarterback anymore. I think they got a Boston College transfer, if I'm remembering right, to be their starting quarterback. Overall, they'll be, I think, decent, but I really don't foresee them being able to beat USC, even with the Trojans making that really long road trip. And then USC gets to face two former Pac-12 teams back to back at home. First one's going to be the Oregon Ducks. Now, Oregon is returning a lot from last season. They bring back the biggest returner is going to be Dante Moore, who is projected to be potentially the second pick in this past or in this upcoming NFL draft. And I think he's going to do a really solid job once again as the Ducks quarterback. Overall, Oregon absolutely is a top 10 team heading into next season. It's going to be a very difficult game here for the Trojans. And even though they're at home, I do think they're going to be underdogs. Oregon, I just really like this team heading into next season. I think they're going to be really good and should be favored, even though they're on the road against USC. Now, Washington, on the other hand, is losing a lot from last year's team, and there's a few concerns that I have about Washington, despite being able to force DeMond Williams back out of the portal once he tried to enter it despite signing a contract. I'm a little bit worried about his commitment to the team and how well he's going to be able to play. And then the other concerns is with the skill positions, particularly at wide receiver. Washington is losing all of their wide receivers from last season, except for one true freshman who did perform very well. I believe he had around 500 receiving yards. They're bringing in a couple guys. I remember one four-star Bodpen Miller from Ohio State. He'll probably be solid if he gets onto the field. He might be another guy who, takes a year or two to actually get out there. But either way, there's a few transfer wide receivers that Washington just needs to be able to step up and actually make an impact. Regardless, I think this USC team is a little bit more talented overall, and because they're at home, we're going to favor them in this game.
The last game before their first bye week is a road trip to take on Penn State. And Penn State's been in the news this entire offseason because the whole head coaching situation. They finally decided on Matt Campbell from Iowa State. And like most other coaching decisions, that led to the majority of the Cyclones roster migrating over to Happy Valley, including starting quarterback Rocco Beck. And I think that Iowa State was okay last year, not really the best team out of the Big 12, certainly in the top half, but I don't know how well it's going to translate for Penn State next season. I do think that they will still be very solid, and defensively, I think they're going to be a great team because it's still going to be predominantly Penn State guys or people that were recruited to play at Penn State because that defense has been great for so many years. But the biggest reason we have this at 50% against a USC team that we probably think is quite a bit better with the amount of returning production they have is for two reasons. The first reason being you're going from the West Coast to the East Coast. So that's just part of the college football landscape right now, but it's going to be very, very difficult for that to happen and for USC maybe not to feel it a little bit. But the second big reason is looking at Penn State's schedule and who their opponents are at home. We've determined that this is the most likely game for the Penn State whiteout next season because all their other opponents at home are not very good or competitive. USC is probably going to be the only team that is ranked or on the border of being ranked, depending on how the earlier parts of the season go for the Trojans. And I do think this is the perfect opportunity for their whiteout game. And we all know the whiteout is one of the toughest environments to play at in all of college football. So we can't have it really any higher or lower for either team at 50% because we don't know a whole lot about this Penn State team yet, but we do know what the environment USC will be going into play at. After that bye week, though, they're on the road again, this time playing against Wisconsin. And Wisconsin ended their season a little bit better than it started. It was off to a really rough start, and there were talks that Luke Fickell was going to be fired. But then I don't know what you want to call it, the athletic directors, the athletic board, or whatever, ended up making the decision that Luke Fickell was going to stay for next season. And after that, they ended up winning a couple big games. I believe they beat Illinois and Washington towards the end of the season, and maybe making some steps in the right direction. But they've just lost really the only playmakers they've had, and they haven't made a ton of great moves or moves that are really making me think they can be a great team that can compete with the likes of USC. But Camp Randall's also a tough place to play in. It's getting towards the colder months, and maybe USC might feel it a little bit, especially after a bye week and a road trip to Penn State. But they should still be favored in this game. Jaden Mayava was really solid last year, and I still think with the weapons around him, even with the new wide receivers, he is going to be just fine and maybe get into some Heisman conversations. But that's a topic for later videos. And then on Halloween, they take on Ohio State, hosting the Buckeyes. And I do think this is going to be a tough game for both of these teams because it's obviously a tough road trip for Ohio State, but arguably Ohio State has just as much talent, if not a little bit more, than what USC has, even if they are losing so much on the defensive end, because they have Julian Sayin, who was a Heisman finalist last year, and Jeremiah Smith, who is the best wide receiver in college football, both returning next season, along with Bo Jackson and 4 or 5 starters on that offensive line. But defensively, it happened last year where they lost so many of their starters and were able to rebuild. It's happening again this year. Can the Buckeyes go 2 for 2, or can USC maybe exploit some of the new faces on that defense? I'm not really sure because there's that continuity with Matt Patricia as the defensive coordinator. I think it's going to be a really interesting game, and one USC might actually be able to upset the Buckeyes in. But we are still going to favor Ohio State because we have seen them have the ability to just reload every year and still be just as good. And maybe this is going to be a game USC even struggles in at home. It's only going to be a 30% chance for USC. It might be a little bit on the low end, but definitely a game to look out for in future videos when we end up talking and know a little bit more about both these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. One final point on that actually is Ohio State. It's a little bit of a trap game for the Buckeyes because Ohio State's next game after that is a home game against Oregon, whereas USC is headed into that bye week. And after that bye week, though, doesn't get any easier. They have to go on the road and face the defending national champion Indiana Hoosiers, undefeated last season. I have to keep saying it to make myself realize that it actually is true that Indiana went 16 and 0. But this Indiana team, they're losing almost everybody from last season, but they rebuilt in the transfer portal in a big way. They grabbed Josh Hoover out of TCU, who Connor and I both thought was going to be really good last season. Now he has some amazing wide receivers in Nick Marsh, as one of them from Michigan State. You're returning Charlie Becker from this national championship team. Just overall, Indiana is going to be really good next season, and USC is going on the road. Not going to be easy whatsoever. So Indiana will be favored in that game. Only about a 35% chance for USC to win. Then you have Maryland at home, and you're probably thinking, Maryland at home, why is that only 60%? This Maryland team last year was really young. They brought in a good transfer portal class, and it seems like nobody's talking about the Terps. But we actually think that they're going to be very solid, and USC 100% should not be overlooking this game near the end of the season. They probably won't be. I don't want to spoil our Maryland predictions, but Maryland might have a decent record going into this game. So USC probably won't end up overlooking them. But yeah, I think Maryland is going to be a very solid team next year. So USC will be favored, but definitely not by as much as you might think. Then you have UCLA on the road. Nico Iamaleava back for year two with the Bruins. And, year one didn't necessarily go as planned by UCLA fans. I think they went 3-9, if I remember correctly. Either that or 4-8. But either way, uh, you would expect UCLA to get a little bit better this season. I don't necessarily know if they're, a 7 or 8 win team. They could maybe make a bowl game this season if they're lucky. It really depends on their schedule. Even with all of that being said, I think that USC has a more talented team, and on the road, they should be able to take care of UCLA. Now, the projection for USC is going to be 7.9 wins just based off of all of those percentages. We are going to predict them as of right now to go 8-4. I just think there's a few tough games on there. Obviously, Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. Those are all teams you'd like to avoid. Playing Penn State in the whiteout's not going to be easy. A few other tricky games on there. It kind of just feels like yes, USC has the potential to make the college football playoffs with a very talented team here. But at the same time, the Big Ten really didn't do them any favors with this schedule. So I think that there would be a few things that really need to fall into place and have a little bit of luck for the Trojans to end up making it. That being said, though, they are tied for 12th in the country with their national championship odds, sitting at plus 3,500, tied with teams like Oklahoma. So, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.